Sarah and her husband Jean are on vacation. They spend their free time swimming in the sea and kissing. They look quite close and very much in love. When their break is over, they return home to Paris. The couple can't stay away from one another, and even at home are hugging and making love every chance they get. Jean receives a call from his mother, Nellie. He tells her all about his holiday with Sarah and asks about news of Marcus. Marcus stays with his grandmother, who cares for him a lot. Jean drives Sarah to work. She is a radio presenter. On her way to the building where she works, she sees a couple she can't keep her eyes off of. She watches them as the man speaks to the lady. He gets ready to ride his bike. As the ominous music plays, Sarah can't bring herself to look away until they finally leave. Sarah puts on her mask and enters the building, but she looks behind her to check if they are still there. Sarah puts her hand on her chest and enters the elevator. After the doors close, she leans back against the wall and whispers the name Francois. Sarah holds herself and repeats the name to herself repeatedly and with a sad voice. Sarah pulls herself together and interviews the Lebanese journalist, Hein Darwish. Sarah asks her about the crisis she is enduring. Hein describes the crisis as social, political, cultural, and moral. Sarah listens to Hein's concerns about corruption in her country. She seems passionate about her job. Jean is a former professional rugby player. He takes care of the shopping and other chores around the house. After a long day of work, Sarah comes back home, looking still shaken by what happened in the morning. She finds Jean cooking dinner and smiles at him appreciatively. Sarah tells Jean about Francois, but he does not say anything. Sarah listens to the silence that follows and asks Jean what he did to pass the time. Jean tells her that he went shopping at Vitry, where he used to stay, and that he did not have enough time to see his mother. Sarah asks Jean if he has met Marcus, and he lies that he has. Sarah is surprised by that and tells him that his son exists for her as well. Jean is an absent father to Marcus, and that worries Sarah a lot because she thinks the teenager is her business too. Sarah confronts Jean and tells him something she has kept from him for years. The first time she saw him was when she was still living with Francois. The three of them went out to a party, and Sarah remembers that at a certain moment, Jean put on music to which she and Francois danced. Jean was behind the computer, looking at them with a smile. Jean's smile is the first thing Sarah noticed about him. Jean was with his ex-wife at the time, and he did not stay far from Sarah. Sarah recalls her memories with Jean, thinking it is wild they are together now. Sarah thought she would always end up with Francois. She tells Jean that she wanted Francois to stay with her after the party, as she cries, remembering the pain of being left behind by Francois. Sarah had told Francois that he was obliged to stay with her, but he had answered that he was not obliged to do anything. Sarah had to walk home alone and rethink her relationship with Francois. She asked herself why she needed to stay with the one who leaves, when she could be with someone like Jean, who went to spend the rest of the night with his wife. Sarah envied Jean's wife. Jean looks at Sarah and asks if she still feels the same because she is now his wife. Sarah is relieved to be with Jean and embraces him. The following morning, Sarah goes to work like most days but lingers around the parking facility where Francois had kept his bike the day before. Sarah looks around her and finds no one. She enters the building disappointedly. Jean is struggling financially. He also can't seem to find any work, especially because he has a prison record. Jean is constantly reminded by his mother to appear in Marcus's life in any way he can. But Jean always makes false promises and never delivers what is necessary for his son. Jean receives a call from Francois. Although he ignores him at first, he learns that Francois is starting a sports agency and wants Jean to work there. Sarah thinks it would be a great opportunity for him and encourages him to take it. Jean is hesitant to accept. He needs to think about it. Sarah doubts that Jean might be scared that some problems might arise from his collaboration with Francois, but Jean confirms that he is not bothered by that and asks Sarah the same question. Sarah tells him it makes her happy to see the two friends reunited and working together. She thinks it might be weird to see him again because when we love someone, it never really goes away. Sarah feels something special for him, but their love story is now over. She reassures Jean by telling him that she is with him now, she will stay with him, and there is no need to worry. Jean thinks Sarah does not need to say all those things because he is not bothered by Francois. Sarah asks Jean if Francois is curious about the status of their relationship. She wants to know if Francois asked if she and Jean are still together. Jean tells her that they did not discuss private matters, but Sarah believes they will, at some point. Sarah thinks that she is the reason why the two friends have not seen each other in years. Jean does not share her opinion and thinks that is not why they are no longer speaking. Jean tells Sarah that when he went to prison, Francois disappeared because each one of them had to take care of his own business. Sarah pushes Jean to admit it is strange that Francois asked no questions about his prison sentence. Jean tells her that Francois did at one point, but that is all. To end Sarah's interrogation, Jean tells her he and Francois did not mention anything about her if that is what she is asking. Sarah tries to close the door with a frustrated expression, but decides against it and asks him another question. Sarah is curious to know why she and Jean never talk. Their lack of communication bothers Sarah, but Jean ignores the problem. Sarah cries alone. Jean finds her and asks again for her point of view. Sarah does not want to talk about how she feels. She wants Jean to open up to her and tell her what he has in mind. Jean feels indifferent, but he thinks he would be glad to see his old friend. Sarah tells him there is no point in hesitating if that is how he feels. Although Jean is excited to meet with Francois, thinking about it stresses him out. Sarah gets closer to Jean and tells him not to worry because people change, and Francois must have changed as well. It has been 10 years, so Sarah believes Francois will be mature. Jean goes out to meet Francois, and by the way Sarah is behaving, it seems she is the one who is stressed to death by Francois' sudden appearance. She looks outside her balcony to find Francois waiting outside their apartment building. Francois sees her and takes off the mask. He looks up at her, and at that moment, Jean gets out to greet him. Sarah hides, but then looks down at them again. She seems to have a breakdown on her own. Sarah holds her face in her hands, having trouble breathing. Jean and Francois' first meeting is a little awkward. Jean asks Francois if life has been hard without him. Francois does not know how to answer that. He can't even look Jean in the eyes. Jean notices that and tells him to look at him. With difficulty, Francois faces his friend, and Jean smiles at him. Nellie is still having trouble reaching Jean on the phone. She tells Marcus to call his father on his phone because maybe he will answer him instead. Marcus is being expelled from his school. He refuses to call Jean because what difference is he going to make? Nellie is exhausted by Marcus because he does not care about anything. Marcus leaves his father a message, asking him to call him back. The young man looks outside the window with apparent sadness. He is very disappointed by Jean. Nellie thinks Marcus needs someone he can admire. Nellie has been taking care of Marcus ever since Jean was in prison because he could not raise his son. But she fears that she is losing control, and that Marcus is growing up so fast without the guidance of a father. Marcus is alone, and even his mother is away. She started a new family, a new life without him, and he feels left behind by both parents. Nellie finds out that there have been many recent withdrawals made from her bank account. One of the bank workers asks her if anyone has borrowed her credit card, and then asks if she has given her PIN to anyone. Nellie tells him that no one has it. Sarah finds Jean on his way out when she goes back home. She learns that he will be visiting Francois' new offices. Jean explains to Sarah what the agency is about. Its purpose is to scout junior players and recruit them. Sarah already knows this, but she wants Jean to speak more about Francois' job. Jean drives to the agency's location and finds Francois smoking outside. Back at home, Sarah is sleepless in bed, and she hears when Jean comes back late. Sarah tells Jean that she is having trouble sleeping. She asks him to join her in bed, but he tells her he will be there in a little bit. Sarah does not let Jean go before she asks if he loves her. Jean nods at her and tells her there is no doubt about that. Sarah feels the same way. She wants to know what Jean and Francois did when they met. Jean gives her a short answer. He thinks there is nothing to tell, and that it was only work-related. Jean kisses her shoulder and tells her to sleep. He walks away, but before he leaves the bedroom, Sarah asks if he and Francois have talked about money. Jean tells her not to worry. Jean happens to have two important events at the same time. While he has to make it to a meeting with Francois, Marcus is counting on him to show up so he will not get expelled. Jean thinks Francois' job offer is a great opportunity, which will open new horizons for him, and if he pushes off the meeting, he might jeopardize his new position as the middleman between Francois and his prospects. Sarah pushes Jean again to answer questions about the financial aspect of his job. She asks if he will have a contract and get paid. Jean thinks it is obvious that if he works, it is expected that Francois will pay him. Sarah believes that Jean is focusing more on Francois' project instead of focusing on his own. She believes he is giving up on it. Jean wants to seize the moment and get back into sports. Since Jean is an ex-convict, he should take any opportunity he gets before it is too late. Jean makes it to Nellie's house in the end. He finds her waiting by the door. Nellie tells Jean she can't let him inside because Marcus does not want to see him. Although Jean canceled a meeting and drove 3 hours so he could see Marcus's teachers, Marcus refused to be around his father. Jean tells Nellie that there won't be another opportunity for him to come back because this is his only free day. Nellie shares her concern with Jean about the people Marcus hangs out with, but she is at least glad that Jean is working and doing good. Nellie refused to let Jean in because Marcus was hiding upstairs in his room. She told Jean that his son was out and she did not know where he was, when in reality he was looking at his father from his window. Jean catches his son and tells him to open the door. Although Jean begs him, Marcus closes the blinds and leaves him outside. Jean goes back to Sarah and cries. Sarah consoles him and tells him that everything will be okay. During her break, Sarah finds a video sent to her by Jean, where he filmed himself and Francois in a stadium in Bayonne. Once back home, Sarah walks in on Jean speaking with Francois on the phone, asking him what his problem is with Sarah. Jean tries to hide that he is upset when he sees her, and he tells her that everything is fine. Sarah pushes Jean for answers, so he tells her when he got to the airport, Francois and others were talking about Sarah, and when Jean got close, they clammed up. Jean was not able to hear what they were saying. He tells Sarah that Francois wanted to know if he was still with her. Sarah is surprised by that because she thought Jean had told Francois about their relationship. Sarah believes the news must have surprised Francois because he may have thought she and Jean would not last. Jean and Sarah have a steamy love session, where they both remember the reason why they are lovers. Sarah starts crying in the middle of their lovemaking, and that seems to trouble Jean. Sarah kept calling him my love over and over again in an emotional voice, so Jean held Sarah's hand and tried to make her feel better. Sarah asks Jean if she can come to the opening of the agency, so he decides to take her. Jean makes Sarah coffee and looks back at her with a suspicious face. Sarah does not look good. She hardly sees him now that he is busy working. Sarah does not feel like Jean's priority anymore. She brings up the topic of the opening again, so Jean asks if she is interested in seeing the agency, or Francois. Sarah tells him she wants to see the agency, and of course she will see Francois as well because he works there. Sarah helps Jean get ready for the big day, and he expects her to show up later at the ceremony. He tells her she is beautiful before he leaves. Sarah arrives at the party and learns that Marcus is also there. Since Jean is very busy, Sarah is left alone, but is approached by an old friend. He asks how she is doing and if she has seen Francois. The man learns she has not and decides to take her to him. Sarah tells the man she does not want to bother the busy man, so it is better if they are not introduced yet. The old friend leaves Sarah his number in case she changes her mind. He smiles at her and tells her she is still as pretty as ever. Sarah watches Francois from afar. He is in the company of another woman. Sarah stares at the couple with teary eyes and leaves the party to cry outside. She can't seem to pull herself together, so she calls Jean. She tells him that she was asked to see him and his friends in the office. Jean tells her that she can find him upstairs. Sarah does not want to go back inside the agency and tells him that she is outside. Jean does not understand what she means and tells her that there is no problem, so there is no reason to worry. Sarah does not know what to say next, and she stutters before she asks him if it would be bothersome for him if she came. Jean does not seem bothered at all and tells her he does not mind, but Sarah hangs up the phone. Sarah's tears go down as she tries to bottle up her feelings. Jean calls her and hands the phone to Francois. Upon hearing his voice, Sarah goes quiet at first. They both can't seem to believe that they are talking to one another. Sarah speaks first and tells him that his offices are nice. Francois asks her where she is. Sarah is surprised that Jean did not tell him she was there. Sarah breaks down in tears and tells Francois that it is moving to hear his voice. Francois feels the same way. Sarah tells him she is outside, so he urges her to come up. Sarah finds Jean and Marcus walking down the stairs. Jean tells her that Francois is waiting upstairs. Sarah takes off her coat when she sees him. Francois intently looks at her with a piercing stare, and they get close, as if nothing could pull them apart. Francois asks Sarah where she has been all this time, and she tells him she has not been far. Francois confesses that he missed her. Sarah and Francois can't keep their hands to themselves, and Francois' companion watches their interaction from afar. Francois asks Jean for Sarah's number. He tells her that he will text her later and that she has to answer. Sarah promises Francois to write back. Before she goes, Francois calls her love. Sarah leaves before she cries again, and Francois watches her go with Jean and Marcus. Sarah waits for Francois' text. She comes out of bed and watches her reflection in the mirror. She anticipates what is to come: love, fear, sleepless nights, and secret conversations. Sarah goes out with Francois. She thinks their story is sad because they are no longer together, but Francois tells her they have always been. Sarah admits that she feels the same way, as if they never lived apart. Francois suggests that they stay together because he loves her. Sarah confesses her feelings as well. She loves Francois. Jean has a deep conversation with Marcus about life's hardships. Jean is a little harsh on his son because he thinks he should understand the path he is going to take, since Marcus thinks he wants a career in retail. Jean does not accept Marcus's decision because he thinks he is not yet mature to make a choice. Jean is worried that his son might end up failing like him. He wants what is best for Marcus and tells him he can always ask for help if he needs it, instead of taking his grandmother's credit card. One night, Jean leaves Sarah alone in bed and she calls Francois under the blanket. Jean starts to get suspicious, so he finds Sarah alone with Francois, who tries to kiss her. Jean confronts Sarah and tells her he never wants to see what he witnessed the night before. Sarah tells Jean that she and Francois never kissed because she pulled away. Jean gives her a chance to come clean, but she starts screaming about how much he cuts her off. Jean does not let her speak and leaves the room, but Sarah follows him to explain everything. Sarah tries her best to convince Jean that he is imagining things. She is sick of his controlling nature. Jean leaves the house, fed up with her accusations because he believes he is not a controlling man. In fact, he thinks he is the opposite. Sarah tries to make things right. She tells Jean that she won't see Francois ever again if that is what he wants. Sarah sits beside Jean and apologizes for hurting him. She tells him that it has not been easy experiencing the past coming back all over again. Jean is worried that this is not just a phase for Sarah, and warns her that he will leave if her past with Francois returns. Jean loses his cool and tells her that the way she treats people sometimes is hurtful. Sarah reassures Jean that she is with him and that he is the man she chose. Jean wants her to have eyes only for him. He tells her that the wound she caused might not heal. His patience is running thin, and he might not stay in her life if she wants to go back to Francois. Sarah starts screaming again, reminding him she pulled her head away, but her words do not matter because Jean's mind is set on leaving. Sarah and Francois have a heart-to-heart conversation about their past. Although Sarah loved him, Francois thought she would leave him, so he wanted to be the first to go. On her way outside work, she finds Francois waiting for her. Sarah and Francois hide somewhere no one can see them. She cries that it is tragic what they go through. Although Jean is hurting, she wants to stay with Francois instead of returning home. Francois takes Sarah to his house. Francois initiates something that worries Sarah. She is not yet ready, so she screams at Francois to distance herself from him. Francois puts on his clothes and tells her she will never see him again. Upon hearing this, Sarah tells him that she loves him. Francois was hurt by Sarah's actions. She tries to persuade him to go back to bed so they can try again. Francois tells her that he will stay, but far away from the bed. In the end, Francois finds his way back to Sarah. He tells her he will never leave again if she stays by his side. Sarah can't even kiss Jean properly. That is how bad her relationship with him has become. Jean leaves to find Marcus, who has not returned home. He goes around the streets asking if anybody has seen his son. Nellie tells Jean that this was ultimately going to happen because Marcus needed more than her. Jean does not know what to do. A family friend ends up finding Marcus. She tells him that everyone is out there looking for him. Francois calls Sarah and tells her she will never guess where he is. Francois is actually on her balcony because he is waiting for Jean. Francois tells his friend that he needs to talk to him. Sarah starts crying, calling Francois a bastard as she hurries back home, feeling a storm about to hit her. Francois leaves Jean's apartment looking emotional. Jean tells Sarah that he is going to stop working for Francois. Sarah thought he was happy, so she asks him for the real reason why he can't work at the agency. Jean reveals that there are things he does not like, which made him let the job go. Sarah wants to know what they are, and she offers him her help. Jean is angered by that, thinking she is the last person he wants help from. Jean informs Sarah that Francois told him to leave her because she is a bad person, fake and insincere. Sarah laughs at the accusations, but Jean tells her that Francois says she plays both sides, so he should be careful. Sarah believes Jean should be more wary of Francois because he is the bad person in this situation. Francois seemed to have a lot to say about Sarah. He told Jean that Sarah wants to be with him and that his friend is in the way of their happiness. Sarah tells Jean that everything Francois said is not true and that he should believe her. Jean already has Sarah and Francois' texts, and knowing this leaves Sarah in shock. Although she tries to lie, Jean quotes everything she writes to Francois. Jean does not want to see Sarah anymore. He asks her to leave the house, but she refuses to take the blame for everything. Jean does not care about Francois, and wonders what he did wrong to deserve Sarah's betrayal. They both start screaming, knowing that their relationship has come to an end. Sarah reveals that she has never been free in her life. All she has done is follow what is right and obey. Jean does not want to hear her excuses and gets ready to leave. Sarah begs him not to go because she doesn't care about Francois. Sarah sits on the floor and asks for his forgiveness. She is no longer lost, and now knows that she betrayed herself before him. Jean is so disgusted by what she has done, he would not even let her touch him. Jean believes he was an angel, who was so in love with her, but now he has turned into a devil who will destroy everything they built together. As Jean starts trashing their place, Sarah tells him there is a loaded gun if he wants to use it. Jean wants nothing to do with her or prison. He will not succumb to the temptation of revenge. He finally tells her what she has been all along, a tramp who makes him want to vomit. Francois calls Sarah, wanting to hear back from her, but she ignores him. Jean comes back home sometime later and finds Sarah in the bathtub. He wants to talk to her. Jean reveals that it physically hurt him to know she loves Francois. It felt as if his heart tore through his chest. Now that he thinks reasonably about everything that happened, he would like to stay with her forever if she still chooses him. But if she and Francois love one another, they can be together because he wants her to be happy. Sarah's phone falls into the water as Francois is still calling her. She tries to fix it, but she learns that everything has been erased, including the phone numbers, and her life as it used to be.